The alarm blared throughout Gangwa Station. Red emergency lights flashed in every corridor. Commander Geo Park ran his hand through his short gray hair and stared at the main screen. The dots representing enemy ships were moving closer to their position. "Status report," he ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. Lieutenant Dahi Kim looked up from her console. Her eyes showed worry, but her voice remained calm. "Sir, the Vorac's fleet has broken through the Cirrus defense line. Our ships there are." She paused. "They're gone, sir." Jiho nodded. He had expected this, but the news still hit hard. Cirrus had been their strongest defense point after Mars fell last year. Now only Gangwa Station stood between the alien invaders and Earth. "How many ships are we facing?" he asked. "At least 50 warships, or maybe more." Dahi tapped her screen, bringing up detailed scans. "They'll reach us in about 48 hours. Jiho looked around the command center. The faces of his crew showed fear, but also determination. They all knew what was at stake. Humanity had been fighting the Vorax Empire for 15 years. At first, the war had gone well. Humans had pushed the aliens back from their outer colonies, but then the Vorax brought in their larger battle fleets. One by one, human colonies had fallen. Now they were making their final stand at Gangwa, the last station before Earth. "How many ships do we have left?" Joe asked, though he already knew the answer would not be good. 5 warships and 12 fighters, Dahi replied. "The civilian evacuation ships are still loading. They need at least another day to get everyone to Earth." Jiho turned to look out the large window. He could see Earth in the distance, a blue marble against the blackness of space. His home. Everyone's home. The only planet humans had evolved on, now at risk of falling to alien control. "Call a meeting of all senior officers," he ordered. 1 hour. We need to plan both defense and evacuation." The meeting room was small and crowded. All 12 senior officers sat around the table, their faces grim. Security Chief Min Ji-yoon was showing the latest defense plans on the main screen. "If we position our remaining ships here and here," she pointed at the display, "we might hold them off for 6 hours. Maybe 8 if we're lucky. That's not enough time to evacuate everyone." Medical Officer Dong Yun-shin protested. "We still have over 10,000 civilians on the station." "We don't have a choice," Minji replied. "We have to buy as much time as possible." The room fell silent. Everyone knew what this meant. The officers in this room would likely die defending the station. It was a sacrifice they were willing to make, but that didn't make it any easier. Joe looked at each of his officers. Brave people, all of them. They deserved better than this desperate last stand. "We'll send the civilian ships first," he decided. Then, there might be another way. All heads turned toward the voice. It came from Engineer Taehyun Kang, an older man who rarely spoke during meetings. He usually stayed in the engine rooms, keeping the station running. "What do you mean?" Joe asked. Taehyun stood up slowly. He was in his 70s, one of the oldest people on the station. His hand shook slightly as he connected his tablet to the main display. "I've never spoken about this because it was classified," he said, "but given our situation, I don't think secrecy matters anymore." The screen changed to show the schematics of a massive ship. It was unlike any vessel Joe had ever seen. The design was sleek yet powerful, with weapon systems he couldn't even recognize. "This is the HKSS Haitei," Taehyun explained, "a super dreadnought built in secret during the early days of the war." Minji laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The Haitei. That's just a story. Something we tell new recruits to give them hope." "No," Taehyun said firmly. "It's real. I was on the design team." The room burst into surprised conversations. Everyone had heard stories about the Haitei, a massive warship with technology far beyond anything humans currently had. Some said it could fight an entire enemy fleet alone. But most people thought it was just a legend, a fairy tale born from desperation. "If this ship is real, Where has it been all this time? Joe asked. Why haven't we used it when we lost Mars, or Luna Station, or any of our colonies? Tahian's face showed deep sadness, because it disappeared during its maiden voyage 50 years ago. It was testing an experimental jump drive when something went wrong. The ship and its entire crew vanished. So it's lost, Dahi said. How does this help us now? Because I know where it is, Tahian replied. Or at least I know where it might be. He changed the display again, showing a section of space not far from their position. It was a nebula, filled with gas and dust that made it difficult for sensors to penetrate. The last transmission from the Heta came from this region, he explained. We searched for years but found nothing. Eventually, the war took priority, and the search was abandoned. But you think it's still there? Joe asked. After 50 years. I have a theory, Taehyun said. The experimental jump drive was designed to fold space-time. If it malfunctioned in a certain way, it could have created a temporal anomaly. The ship might be trapped in a time dilation field. So not only do you think this fairy tale ship exists, Minji said skeptically, but you think it's frozen in time inside a nebula that we can't even scan properly. Yes, Taehyun said simply. The room fell silent again. Joe studied the old engineer's face. Taehyun wasn't a man who made things up. If he believed the Heta was there, he must have good reasons. Even if you're right, Weapons Officer Junho Yang said, we can't search an entire nebula in 2 days. We don't need to, Taehyun replied. I've been working on calculations for years. I've narrowed the possible locations to 3 small areas. Jiho stood up and walked to the window. The situation was desperate. They couldn't defeat the Vorax fleet with what they had. If there was even a small chance this legendary ship existed, how fast could we check these locations? He asked. With our fastest scout ship, maybe 18 hours to search all 3 areas, Taehyun answered. That leaves us just 30 hours to get back and prepare for battle, Dahi pointed out. If we find nothing, we'll have wasted valuable preparation time. And if we find the Heyday, we might actually survive this, Jio countered. He turned to face his officers again. I'll lead the search mission. I need volunteers. I'll go, Taehyun said immediately. I know what to look for. I'll pilot, offered Hyun-Woo Lee, their best pilot. He was usually quiet, but his skills were unmatched. You'll need a tactical officer, Dahi added. I volunteer. Jiho nodded. Thank you. We'll leave in 1 hour. He turned to Minji. While we're gone, you're in command. Continue the civilian evacuation and prepare our defenses. If we don't return in 30 hours, assume we failed and proceed with the original plan. Minji nodded grimly. Understood, sir. As the meeting ended, Jio pulled Taehyun aside. Are you absolutely sure about this? The old engineer's eyes were clear and determined. My father was on that ship, Commander. I've spent my life trying to find it. This is our last chance, for the Heyday, for Earth, for everyone. Jio looked at the schematics again. If this ship was real, and if they could find it, maybe there was hope after all. But those were big ifs. An hour later, the small scout ship left Gangwa Station, heading toward the nebula. Behind them, the station continued preparations for what might be humanity's last battle. Ahead of them lay either humanity's doom or its salvation. The search for the fairy tale had begun. The scout ship cut through space silently. Inside, Commander Geo Park watched as the nebula grew larger on the main screen. It looked like a giant cloud of purple and blue gas. Bright stars shone through parts of it, but most of the nebula was too thick to see through. We're approaching the outer edge, Pilot Hyun-Woo Lee said, his hands moving across the controls. Sensors are already starting to fail. Jiho nodded. They had expected this. Nebulas were famous for blocking sensors and communications. That's why finding anything inside would be so difficult. How long until we reach the first search area? He asked. Hyun-Woo checked his navigation system. About 3 hours. Once we're inside the nebula, I'll have to fly manually. It will be slower. In the back of the small ship, Engineer Taehyun Kang and Lieutenant Dae Kim prepared the special scanning equipment they had brought. It was designed to detect the unique energy signature of the Hate's engines. "Do you really think we'll find it?" Dahi asked quietly, so only Taehyun could hear. The old engineer paused his work. "I have to believe we will," he said, "not just for Earth, but for my father and the 500 crew members who disappeared with the ship." "You never told us your father was on the Hate," Dahi said, surprised. "He was the chief engineer," Taehyun replied. His voice was soft, but full of emotion. "I was just a boy when they left. When the ship disappeared, I decided to become an engineer too. I wanted to understand what went wrong." Before Dahi could respond, Hyunwoo called from the front. "We're entering the nebula now. Everyone hold on. It might get bumpy." The scout ship pushed through the outer layers of the nebula. The view outside changed from black space to swirling clouds of colorful gas. The ship shook as it passed through denser patches. "Sensors are down to 30% effectiveness," Dahi reported, checking her screens. "Communications with Gangwa Station are completely cut off." "We're on our own now," Jiho said. He turned to Taehyun. "Guide us to the first location." 6 hours later, they had searched the first area completely. They found nothing but gas, dust, and small space rocks. No sign of the legendary warship. "That's one location down," Jiho said, trying to hide his disappointment. "Let's move to the second area." As Hyunwoo adjusted their course, he spoke up. "I have something to tell you." His voice was unusually serious. "My father also served on the Hate." Everyone turned to look at him in surprise. "He was a junior pilot," Hyunwoo continued. "I never knew him. He left before I was born, but my mother told me stories about him and the ship." "Why didn't you say anything earlier?" Jiho asked. Hyunwoo kept his eyes on the controls. "Because I didn't want to seem biased. But there's something else you should know. Before the Heta was officially declared lost, my father's personal beacon sent one final transmission. It came from the third search area, not the second." Taehyun moved quickly to the front of the ship. "Why wasn't I told about this? I was part of the search team." "It was classified at the highest level," Hyunwoo explained. "My mother only learned about it years later, from an officer who felt she deserved to know. By then, the search had been called off." Jiho thought for a moment. "Change of plans. We're going to the third area first." "But my calculations showed the second area was more likely," Taehyun protested. "Your calculations didn't include this new information," Jiho pointed out. "How long to reach the third area?" Hyunwoo. "About 4 hours if we go directly." "Do it," Jiho ordered. He checked the time. They had already used 9 hours of their 48-hour window. Time was running out. The third search area was deeper in the nebula. The gas was thicker here, making it hard to see even a few hundred meters ahead. Hyunwoo flew slowly, carefully avoiding denser patches that could damage their ship. "Begin scanning pattern," Jiho ordered. Dahi activated the special sensors. "Scanning now." "But the nebula is interfering more than we expected. Range is limited to about 5 kilometers. That means we need to move in a tighter search pattern," Jiho said. "It will take longer." Taehyun looked worried. "We don't have much time left." "We'll find it," Jiho assured him, though he wasn't as confident as he sounded. They searched for 3 more hours, moving back and forth through the search area in a careful pattern. Still nothing. Jiho was beginning to think they had made a mistake. Maybe the Heta really was just a fairy tale. Then Dahi's console beeped loudly. "I'm picking up something," she exclaimed. "Metal. A lot of it. About 3 kilometers ahead. Could be just a large asteroid," Jiho cautioned, not wanting to raise hopes. "No, sir," Dahi replied, her voice excited. "I'm detecting a faint energy signature. It matches the pattern Taehyun programmed." Hyunwoo immediately adjusted their course. moving closer. As they approached, the nebula seemed to thin out slightly. And then suddenly, they saw it. A massive ship hung in space before them. It was at least 10 times larger than their scout ship. Its dark hull was smooth and unmarked. No lights showed in its windows. It appeared to be completely dead in space. But it was definitely the Hete. Its distinctive shape matched the schematics Taehyun had shown them perfectly. "We found it," Taehyun whispered, his voice full of awe and emotion. "After 50 years, we actually found it." Jiho could hardly believe what he was seeing. "Is it functional? Can we wake it up?" Taehyun studied the readings on Dahi's screen. The ship appears to be in some kind of stasis. All systems are powered down to minimal levels. He pointed to one reading. "But look at this. The time dilation field I theorized about. It's real. Time inside that field is moving about 10,000 times slower than normal." "What does that mean?" Hanwoo asked. "It means that for the crew of the Hede, only about 4 hours have passed since they disappeared 50 years ago," Taehyun explained. "To them, they just experienced a jump drive malfunction a few hours ago." Jiho tried to process this incredible information. "Are you saying the crew is still alive?" "Theoretically, yes," Taehyun said. "But we need to disable the time dilation field first. Then we can board the ship." "Can you do that?" Joe asked. Taehyun nodded. "I helped design the ship's safety systems. There should be an emergency override for the jump drive. If I can access the external maintenance board, I can send the shutdown command." "Then let's do it," Gio decided. "Hyunwoo, bring us alongside. We're going to dock with the Hete." The scout ship moved carefully toward the massive warship. As they got closer, they could see more details of its incredible design. The weapons systems were unlike anything currently in use. Multiple huge cannons lined the hull, along with smaller defensive weapons. "It's even more impressive than the schematics showed," Dahi said in wonder. Hyunwoo guided their ship to a docking port on the side of the Hete. With a gentle bump and a hiss of connecting airlocks, they made contact. "Docking complete," he reported. Taehyun was already putting on a spacesuit. "I'll need to access the external panel first. Once I disable the time dilation field, we can enter normally." "I'm coming with you," Jiho said, reaching for another suit. 20 minutes later, Taehyun and Jiho stood on the hull of the legendary warship. Taehyun found the maintenance panel and opened it with a special tool he had brought. Inside were controls that only someone with his knowledge would understand. "Here goes," he said, entering a long code. "This will gradually reduce the time dilation field. We need to do it slowly to avoid shocking the systems." After he finished, they returned to their ship and waited. An hour passed as the field slowly dissipated. Then Dahi's console beeped again. "I'm detecting power surges throughout the Hede," she reported. "Systems are coming online, and I'm picking up life signs. Hundreds of them." "They're waking up," Taehyun said, his voice full of emotion. "The crew is still alive." Suddenly, their communication system activated. A voice came through, sounding confused but authoritative. "This is Captain Jinsu Choi of the HKSS Hete. Identify yourself and explain why you're docked with my ship." Jiho looked at his team, seeing his own amazement reflected in their faces. Then he answered the call. "Captain Choi, this is Commander Geo Park from Gangwa Station. This may be difficult to believe, but you've been trapped in a time dilation field for 50 years, and we desperately need your help." 50 years. Captain Jinsu Choi repeated, his face showing disbelief. "That's impossible." They sat in the Haiti's main conference room. The ship was now fully powered up, its systems coming back online one by one. The crew moved around in confusion, trying to understand what had happened to them. "I know it's hard to believe," Jiho said, "but it's true. The experimental jump drive created a time dilation field. While only a few hours passed for you, 50 years went by for the rest of us." Jinsu looked at the data on the screen in front of him. Ship logs confirmed a jump drive malfunction. The last recorded date was indeed 50 years ago. "And you say Earth is about to fall to alien invaders?" he asked. "The Vorax Empire," Dahi explained. "They attacked our outer colonies 15 years ago. We've been losing ground ever since. Now they're about to attack Gangwa Station, our last defense before Earth." Taehyun stepped forward. "Captain, my father was your chief engineer, Han Taehyun. I'm his son." Jin-Soo's eyes widened. "You're little Taehyun, but you were only 5 years old when we left." "I'm 55 now," Taehyun said with a sad smile. "My father?" Jin-Soo pointed to a door. "He's in engineering. He was trying to fix the jump drive when we got stuck." Before they could say more, the door opened and an older man walked in. He looked exactly like Taehyun, only about 20 years younger. "Son," the older man whispered, staring at Taehyun in shock. Taehyun couldn't speak. He simply nodded and embraced his father. Everyone in the room watched in silence, understanding the incredible moment they were witnessing. After a few minutes, Jin-Soo gently cleared his throat. "We need to focus. How long until the Vorax fleet reaches Gangwa Station?" "Less than 30 hours now," Geo replied, "and it will take us at least 15 hours to get back." Jin-Soo nodded and stood up. "Then we need to move quickly. Chief Engineer Han, is the ship combat ready?" The elder Han wiped tears from his eyes and straightened up. "Yes, sir. The jump drive is damaged, but all weapons and defensive systems are operational." "Good. Let's see what we're facing." Jin-Soo turned to Dahi. "Lieutenant, please transfer all tactical data on the Vorax fleet to our systems." Dahi nodded and began the transfer. The main screen soon filled with images of Vorax ships and their attack patterns. 50 Vorax warships, Jin-Soo said, studying the screen. "Against 1 Hete." He smiled slightly. "I like those odds." "Sir." Joe looked confused. "The Vorax ships are extremely powerful. Our entire fleet couldn't stop them." "Commander Park," Jin-Soo said, "do you know why the Hete was built?" "To turn the tide of the war," Geo guessed. "No, it was built to end wars before they began." Jin-Soo pressed a button, bringing up the Hete's weapon systems on the screen. "This ship has technology that was meant to be revealed 20 years after its launch. Technology that would make it clear to any enemy that fighting humans was a bad idea." The screen showed weapons that Joe had never seen before. Matter conversion cannons that could turn enemy ships into harmless gas. Adaptive shield systems that grew stronger with each hit. An AI tactical system that could predict enemy movements before they happened. "The Hete was designed to face an entire fleet alone," Jin-Soo explained. "We never got to test that claim. Until now." For the next few hours, the crews of both ships worked together. The Hete's systems needed updating with 50 years of new information. Chiho, Dahi, and Hyunwoo shared everything they knew about the Vorax tactics and weapons. Meanwhile, Taehyun worked with his father and the Hete's chief weapons officer, Sunmin Han, to bring all combat systems to full power. "The matter conversion cannons are at 90% efficiency," Sunmin reported. "We need another hour to reach full power." "We don't have an hour," Jin-Soo replied, checking the time. "We need to leave now if we want to reach Gangwa before the Vorax. Prepare for departure." As they prepared to leave, Dahi met Communications Officer Jiwon Park in the ship's control center. Jiwon was adjusting the communication systems, trying to make them compatible with modern frequencies. "Is it strange?" Dahi asked. "Finding out that everyone you knew is probably gone." Jiwon looked up from her work. "It hasn't really hit me yet. I keep thinking this is just a long mission." She paused. "I had a fiancé waiting for me. I wonder what happened to him." Dahi didn't know what to say. How could anyone prepare for learning they had lost 50 years in what felt like an afternoon? "Let me help you with those frequencies," she offered instead, sitting down next to Jiwon. As they worked, Jiwon explained more about the ship's capabilities. "The Hete doesn't just fight conventionally. she said. It was designed to adapt to enemy tactics in real time and counter them before they're even executed. The AI system is constantly learning and evolving. That's amazing, Dahi said. No wonder it became such a legend. On the bridge, Jiho watched as Captain Jinsu prepared his crew for departure. Navigation. Plot a course to Gangwa Station, Jinsu ordered. Full speed. What about the jump drive? Joe asked. Can we use it to get there faster? Jinsu shook his head. Too risky. The conventional engines will have to do. We'll arrive just before the Vorax fleet if we leave now. Captain, the navigator called out. Course plotted and ready. Engage, Jinsu ordered. The massive warship began to move. Its engines glowed blue as it pulled away from the nebula. For the first time in 50 years, the Heta was heading into battle. The journey back was tense. While the Heta moved through space, its crew worked nonstop to prepare for battle. Many of them were still coming to terms with the fact that 50 years had passed, that friends and family were now gone. But they focused on their duties, understanding that Earth's survival depended on them. Pilot Hyunwoo spent most of his time with the Heta's flight crew, teaching them about modern flight patterns and Vorax maneuvers. At one point, he found himself working with a pilot named Minjun Lee. Lee, that's my family name too, Hyunwoo said. Common name, Minjun replied with a shrug. My father was a pilot on this ship, Hyunwoo continued. Dongjin Lee. Minjun's head snapped up. Dongjin is my best friend. He works in the second shift. He studied Hyunwoo's face. You look like him. An hour later, Hyunwoo met his father for the first time. Dongjin Lee was only 30 years old, 2 years younger than his own son. This is very strange, Dongjin said, looking at Hyunwoo with wonder. I have a son older than me. I've waited my whole life to meet you, Hyunwoo said, his voice thick with emotion. But their reunion was cut short by the alarm. They were approaching Gangwa Station. Status report, Jinsu called out as he entered the bridge. Gangwa Station is under attack, the tactical officer reported. The Vorax fleet arrived early. They'd broken through the outer defenses. On the main screen, they could see the space battle. The 5 human warships were fighting bravely, but they were no match for the 50 Vorax ships. The station's shields were already weakening. How much time before the station's shields fail? Jinsu asked. Minutes at most, Dahi replied from her console. We arrived just in time. Jinsu sat in the captain's chair. Battle stations. Prepare all weapons. We're going in. Captain. Hyunwoo called from the communication station. I'm intercepting Vorax transmissions. They've detected us, but they don't believe we're real. They think we're a holographic decoy. Jinsu smiled. Good. Let them think that. He turned to Jiho. Commander Park, I believe it's time to introduce the Vorax to the Boogeyman they've been hearing stories about. Open a channel to Gangwa Station, he ordered, and to all human ships. When the channel opened, he spoke clearly. This is Captain Jinsu Choi of the HKSS Hete. The fairy tale is real, and we've come to even the odds. With that, the legendary warship accelerated toward the heart of the Vorax fleet, its weapons systems powering up for the battle that would decide humanity's fate. The Heta burst into the middle of the space battle like a ghost ship from legend. Its massive hull gleamed against the backdrop of explosions and laser fire. For a moment, all fighting seemed to pause as both human and Vorax ships turned their attention to the new arrival. All weapons ready. Tactical Officer Sum in hand reported from his station. Shields at maximum. Captain Jinsu Choi stood calmly at the center of the bridge. Target the 3 largest Vorax ships first. Fire when ready. Sum pressed the firing controls. The Heta shuddered slightly as its main weapons activated for the first time in 50 years. Brilliant beams of blue energy shot from the matter conversion cannons. They cut through space and hit the first Vorax ship directly. Instead of exploding, the enemy vessel simply began to dissolve, it all turning into harmless gas. "Direct hit," Sunman announced. "Target 1 neutralized." On the Vorax command ship, Supreme Commander Raksha could not believe what he was seeing. One of his best warships had just disappeared. Not exploded, not broken apart, but literally turned into nothing. "What was that?" he demanded. "What ship is that?" His officers scrambled to answer. "Unknown vessel, sir. Much larger than any human ship we've encountered. Its design doesn't match anything in our records." Raksha studied the strange ship on his screen. It must be some kind of trick. A hologram with hidden explosives, perhaps. He made a quick decision. "All ships, focus fire on the new vessel. Destroy it immediately." Across the battlefield, 40 Vorax ships turned their weapons toward the Hete. It was exactly what Captain Jinsu had wanted. "They're taking the bait," he said with satisfaction. "All shields forward. Prepare for impact." The space around the Hete lit up as hundreds of Vorax energy weapons fired at once. The shields glowed bright white as they absorbed the massive attack. "Shield status?" Jinsu asked calmly. "Shields holding at 92%, Chief Engineer Han reported. "The adaptive system is already learning their weapons patterns. Each hit makes us stronger." Jinsu nodded. "Return fire. Take out their flanking ships." The Hete's secondary weapons came to life. Dozens of smaller cannons fired at once, hitting Vorax ships with perfect accuracy. 5 enemy vessels exploded in rapid succession. On Gangwa Station, Security Chief Minji Yoon stared at her screen in disbelief. "Is that really the Hete?" she asked. "The ship from the stories." "It's real." Commander Jiho's voice came through the communication system. "And we're aboard it." "How is this possible?" Minji demanded. "I'll explain later," Jiho replied. "Right now, we need to coordinate our attacks. Have your remaining ships target the Vorax vessels moving toward the station. The Hete will handle the main fleet." Minji quickly relayed the orders to the human ships. Despite their heavy damage, they responded immediately, turning to protect the station with renewed hope. "The Vorax are splitting their forces," Dahi reported from her tactical station on the Hete. "Half are still focused on us, but the rest are heading for Gangwa Station. They're trying to complete their mission," Jinsu said. "Pilot, bring us between the Vorax and the station." The massive warship moved with surprising speed, positioning itself as a shield between the Vorax fleet and Gangwa Station. "Defensive pattern Alpha," Jinsu ordered. "Protect the station at all costs." The battle raged for over an hour. The Hete moved through the Vorax fleet like an ancient warrior through common soldiers. Its weapons tore through enemy hulls as if they were paper. Its shields absorbed punishment that would have destroyed any other human ship many times over. But most devastating was its adaptability. The ship's AI tactical system analyzed Vorax attack patterns and predicted their movements before they happened. Each time the Vorax tried a new strategy, the Hete was already countering it. On the bridge, Jiho watched in amazement as the legendary ship performed even better than the stories had claimed. Captain Jinsu commanded with calm confidence, as if he had been fighting the Vorax all his life. "Captain," Sunman called out, "I'm detecting a power surge in the Vorax flagship. They're preparing to jump away." "They're retreating," Dahi said, unable to hide her excitement. "Not yet," Jinsu replied. He turned to Chief Engineer Han. "Is the targeted jump system operational?" Han checked his console. "Yes, sir, but it's our most classified system." "Are you sure?" "Absolutely," Jinsu said firmly. "Lock onto the Vorax flagship. Calculate jump coordinates to place us directly in their escape path." Han nodded and began working quickly. "Coordinates locked. Jump ready on your command." "Execute," Jinsu ordered. The Hete disappeared in a flash of blue light. For a moment, it was gone from the battlefield. Then it reappeared directly in front of the fleeing Vorax flagship, its weapons pointed at the enemy's command center. "Open a channel to the Vorax flagship," Jinsu ordered. When the connection was established, he spoke clearly. "This is Captain Jinsu Choi of the HKSS Haitei. Your fleet is defeated. Surrender now or be destroyed." On the Vorax ship, Supreme Commander Raksha stared at the screen in shock. The human vessel had somehow predicted exactly where they would try to escape and had beaten them there. It was impossible. "What are you?" he asked, his voice shaking slightly. "We are humanity's sword and shield," Jinsu replied. "The ship you thought was just a fairy tale. Spread the word to your empire. Earth is under our protection now. Any future attacks will meet the same fate." Raksha looked around at his damaged bridge, at the reports of his destroyed fleet. He had lost over 30 ships to this single human vessel. His mission was a complete failure. We will withdraw," he said finally. As the remaining Vorax ships gathered and jumped away from Earth, cheers erupted on Gangwa Station and throughout the human fleet. The battle was over. Earth was safe. "They're gone," Dahi reported, checking her sensors. "All Vorax ships have left the system." Jinsu nodded and let out a small sigh of relief. Then he turned to Jiho. "Commander Park, please open a channel to Gangwa Station." When the connection was established, Minji's face appeared on the screen. She looked stunned but overjoyed. "Captain Choi, I don't know how to thank you," she said. "You saved the station. You saved Earth." "We did what we were built to do," Jinsu replied simply. "The Haita was created for this moment." "The stories didn't do it justice," Minji admitted, shaking her head in wonder. After the communication ended, Jinsu stood from his captain's chair. "Stand down from battle stations. Begin damage assessment and repairs." As the crew moved to follow his orders, Jinsu walked to the observation deck with Jiho. They stood together, looking out at the stars and at Earth shining blue and beautiful in the distance. "What will you do now?" Joe asked. "You and your crew are 50 years out of time." Jinsu considered the question. "We'll adapt. That's what humans do." He smiled slightly. "Besides, I think Earth still needs the Haita. The Vorax will return eventually, maybe with a larger fleet. And we'll be ready for them," Jiho said with confidence. "Yes, we will," Jinsu agreed. "They thought we were just a fairy tale. Now they know better." He paused, looking at the planet he had sworn to protect. "Sometimes, Commander, fairy tales exist to remind us that the impossible is just waiting for the right moment to become possible." In the days that followed, word spread across human space about the miraculous return of the Haita. The ship that time forgot had arrived exactly when humanity needed it most. Children who had grown up hearing bedtime stories about the legendary warship now saw it with their own eyes, patrolling Earth's skies like a guardian from myth come to life. The tide of the war had turned. The ship that the Vorax had dismissed as a mere human fairy tale had become their worst nightmare. And it was just the beginning of humanity's comeback. As Captain Jinsu told his new crew members from Gangwa Station, "The best stories aren't the ones that end with victory. They're the ones that begin with it."